My name is Derek Paulson, and in 1994 I was running courier routes through the Willamette Valley down into the Coast Range, Corvallis to the coast mostly, with a side loop that took me up through some of the older logging towns that hadn't quite decided whether they were dying or just sleeping. I rode a 91 Honda CB750, kept a laminated route card zip-tied to my handlebars, and I got paid per delivery. No GPS, obviously. No cell phone. You memorized your stops, or you pulled over and read your clipboard. The job that got me started on this whole thing came in on a Tuesday in late October. My dispatcher, a guy named Ron, who smelled like burnt coffee and never looked up from his desk, handed me a yellow envelope and said the client had specifically requested same-day delivery to a property out past Delwood, which isn't even a real town. It's just a name on a sign where a logging road meets the highway. The address on the envelope was for something called Harrow Creek Station. Ron told me it used to be a forestry substation during the war years, converted to private use sometime in the 60s. He said the current owner ran it as some kind of private archive or research retreat. He said it like he'd memorized the description from a form and didn't particularly believe it. I found the place without too much trouble. Half a mile up a gravel road, through second-growth Douglas fir that pressed in close on both sides, and then a clearing with a long, low building that looked like it had started as a military barracks and been added onto in stages, each addition slightly misaligned from the last, like someone kept changing their mind about which direction the building was supposed to face. There were two other vehicles in the lot, a rusted Bronco and a newer Subaru with Oregon plates, and the front door was propped open with a fire extinguisher. I knocked on the door frame anyway. Nobody came. I stepped inside. The front room smelled like mildew and old paper, and something underneath that I couldn't name. Something faintly metallic, the way the air smells near old iron. There was a folding table just inside the door with a handwritten sign taped to it. Sign in. All visitors. There was a clipboard on the table with a sign-in sheet and a second piece of paper next to it, laminated, with a header that read, Harrow Creek Station. Operational guidelines. I remember thinking that was a little odd for what was supposed to be a private archive. But I signed in, noted my time of arrival, 4:47 p.m., and while I was waiting, I read the guidelines. I wish I hadn't. They were formatted like any standard workplace safety document. Numbered. Professional. The first few were normal enough. No smoking inside the structure. No removing materials from the reading room without prior written authorization. All exterior doors to remain closed between dusk and dawn. Then number 6. Do not acknowledge sounds originating from the east corridor after 5 p.m. Number 7. If you observe a figure in the tree line, do not make eye contact and do not indicate that you have seen it. Move to the interior of the building and remain there for no fewer than 20 minutes. Number 8. The name on the door at the end of the east corridor is not a current employee. Do not open that door under any circumstances. Do not read the name aloud. I read that 3 times. I told myself it was some kind of elaborate prank, or an art project, or hazing for new researchers. I set the envelope on the table next to the clipboard and called out again. This time, someone came, a woman in her 50s, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, who introduced herself as Dr. Voss. She seemed unsurprised to see me, thanked me for the delivery, and then asked, very calmly, if I had read the guidelines. I said I had. She nodded and said, "Good. Then you know to be out of the building before 5. She looked at the clock on the wall. It was 4:52. I was back on my bike by 4:54. The sun was already below the tree line, and the gravel road back to the highway was in deep shadow. I had my headlight on. I was maybe 100 yards from the clearing when I heard it. A sound from the tree line to my right, something rhythmic and heavy, like boots on wet ground, keeping pace with me. I accelerated. The sound accelerated. I told myself it was a deer, which was almost plausible. And then I told myself it was nothing, which was less plausible. And then I got to the highway and didn't stop until I reached the gas station at Delwood and sat there under the fluorescent lights for 15 minutes, listening to my engine tick. I didn't think about it much after that. I had other routes. Winter came. I filed it in the part of my brain that handles things that don't resolve cleanly. Then in February, I picked up another delivery to the same address. Ron handed it to me without comment, and I didn't say anything either. I don't know why I took it. Maybe because I wanted to prove to myself that the first time had been nothing. This time, I arrived at 3:30 in the afternoon. Dr. Vass wasn't there. There was a different man at the desk, young, early 20s, introduced himself as a graduate student doing archival work. He seemed relaxed. He signed for the envelope, and I was about to leave when I noticed the guidelines sheet had been updated. It was still laminated, which meant someone had reprinted and relaminated it, because there was a new entry. Number 9. The individual who arrived on October 25th, 1994, is known to the station. If this individual returns, do not discuss the East Corridor. Do not confirm or deny the contents of that wing. Escort them out before dusk, without explanation. October 25th was the date I'd signed in. I was the individual. I asked the graduate student what that meant. He looked at the sheet, looked at me, and his relaxed expression went somewhere else entirely. He said he'd only been there 3 weeks, and he didn't write the guidelines. He said he didn't know who had. He said they were there when he arrived. I asked him when the previous version had been laminated. He turned it over. On the back, written in marker, updated, 10/26/94. The day after my first visit, somebody had updated the rules the day after I came, specifically because I had come. Something in or around that building knew I had been there, and whoever maintained those rules considered that significant enough to document. I left. I didn't run, because I was trying to be calm. But I left quickly, and I took the graduate student with me because he seemed like he shouldn't be left there alone, and he didn't argue. We made it to the highway with 40 minutes to spare before dusk. We didn't talk much. At the gas station, he asked me if I'd heard anything in the East Corridor during my first visit. I told him I hadn't gone near the East Corridor. He said that was probably why I was fine. He said the name on the door at the end of that corridor, the one the guidelines said not to read aloud. He'd looked it up in the county historical records because he was an archivist, and that was what he did. The name belonged to a man who died at Harrow Creek in 1863. Not the building, the creek itself, downstream from where the station was eventually built. He died during a skirmish in the Confederacy's failed push into the Pacific Northwest territories. One of the engagements most history books have footnoted out of existence because neither side wanted to claim it. The man had been left there, not buried, just left. I don't know exactly what was in that building. I know that something kept pace with me in the dark, and that somebody, or something, thought my presence was worth writing down. I gave notice to Ron the following Monday and took a job with a print shop in Corvallis. I never went back to Delwood. About 18 months ago, a journalist reached out to me. She was writing about historical anomalies in Pacific Northwest land records, properties with unusual deed restrictions, places that changed hands in ways that didn't track with standard inheritance law. She'd found Harrow Creek Station in the records. She said the property had been in the same family for 4 generations. She said the family had a word for what was on that land. Not a description. A name. A specific name. The same name that was on the door at the end of the East Corridor. She said the family had known about it since the 1860s. She said they had been managing it, her word, for all that time. She asked me if I'd ever heard sounds that seemed to track my movement in the dark. I told her yes. She said, "We know. We've been watching that road for 30 years. My name is Donna Pruitt. In the summer of 1994, I was driving a '91 Ford Aerostar with my daughter Kayla strapped into the back seat, a cooler full of RC Cola and bologna sandwiches wedged between us, and about 400 miles of Ozark Highway still ahead. I was a court reporter out of Springfield, Missouri, and I'd taken a freelance job doing audio transcription for a documentary crew that had been filming up in the hills outside of Jasper. They needed someone to drive up, collect 3 boxes of recorded interview tapes, and bring them back for processing. It was a Tuesday. Kayla was 9. My mother was supposed to watch her, but had come down with something, so Kayla came with me. I figured we'd make it a little road trip. Stay one night up in the hills, come back Wednesday morning. Simple. We pulled into the Whispering Pines Caravan Park just after 7 in the evening. The light was that thick amber kind you only get in the Ozarks in late June, where everything looks like it's been dipped in honey and set out to dry. The park had maybe 30 sites, most of them empty. The woman at the check-in office was named Berta, heavy-set, with a laminated ID badge and the kind of reading glasses that hang on a beaded chain. She gave me a site map, charged me $22 for the night, and told me the bathhouse closed at 10. I asked her if the documentary crew had been staying here. She looked at me over those glasses for just a second too long before saying they'd checked out 2 days ago. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Our site was number 14, tucked back near the tree line. The Aerostar's rental camper hookup wasn't anything fancy, just electricity and a water spigot, but it was enough. I got Kayla settled with a bag of chips and a paperback, and I went through the first box of tapes. They were labeled in black marker, interview dates, subject initials, location codes, all standard. I stacked them, made my inventory list, and turned on the little transistor radio I always traveled with. 107.3 out of Fayetteville was playing Shania Twain. Normal evening, crickets starting up outside. I felt fine. Sometime around 9:30, the radio drifted. These old transistors do that, especially in the hills, where the signal bounces off the rock formations. I reached over to retune it, and as I was turning the dial through the static, I caught a voice. Just a few seconds of it, halfway between 2 stations. A woman's voice, low and even, like she was reading from something. What stopped my hand was that she said my name. Donna. Clear as anything. Then static swallowed it back up. I sat there with my hand on the dial. My heart had done that clenching thing. I told myself it was a coincidence. Donna is a common enough name, and voices in radio static have a way of sounding personal when you're alone at night. I tuned back to 107.3, got the tail end of a Ford truck commercial, and went to bed. Kayla was already asleep. I woke up at 2:14 in the morning. I remember the clock because I looked at it twice to make sure I was reading the green numbers right. The radio was on. I had turned it off before sleep. I'm certain of that, I always do. But it was on, and it was set to that same dead frequency, the one between stations. The voice was coming through clearly now, no static, no drift. It was a woman doing an interview. I could hear the faint ambient sound of a tape player, the slight warble of old magnetic recording, and I realized with a slow, terrible clarity that I was listening to one of the documentary tapes. Someone had a tape player outside the camper. They were playing it directly into the radio somehow, or that's what I told myself, because the alternative didn't make sense. The voice on the tape was a man being interviewed. He was talking about a woman he called the listener, and he said she came to the park every summer and sat outside other people's campers in the dark and waited. He described her clothing, a green windbreaker, dark pants. And then the interviewer on the tape asked him if he had ever seen her face. He said no. He said she always had her back turned when you noticed her. But he said the thing that let you know it was her was that she hummed, low and steady, like she was following a song only she could hear. I turned off the radio. I checked the door locks, both the handle lock and the sliding deadbolt I'd thrown out of habit. I looked out the small window above the dinette. The tree line was 30 feet away. There was just enough moonlight to see the gravel strip beside the site and the dark shapes of the pine trees beyond it. I didn't see anyone. I put my hand on Kayla's shoulder and felt her breathing, slow and deep. I sat on the edge of my bunk and I waited. At 3:05, I heard the humming. It was outside, at the rear of the camper, near the electrical hookup. Low, steady, tuneless, the way the man on the tape had described it. My whole body went cold in a specific, physical way, the kind where your hands stop feeling like your own. I did not open the door. I am not going to pretend I was brave. I took Kayla by the shoulder, woke her with one hand over her mouth, whispered to her that we needed to go sit in the front cab and not make any noise. She was a good kid. She understood from my face that I was not playing. We moved to the front seats. I put the key in the ignition but didn't start it. I didn't want the engine sound to mask anything. The humming had moved. It was alongside the camper now, near the middle, passing toward the front. Slow, unhurried, like a person walking a familiar route. Kayla had her knees pulled up to her chest and both hands over her ears, and I had my hand on the gear shift. The humming stopped directly outside the passenger window. I could feel the presence the way you feel someone standing too close in a quiet room. I did not look. I kept my eyes on the dashboard, on the little pine tree air freshener spinning slowly from the rearview mirror, on anything that was not the window. Then Kayla made a sound, not a scream, just a small, involuntary intake of breath. And I turned. There was a woman standing at the passenger window, green windbreaker, dark pants. Her face was turned away toward the tree line, so I saw only the back of her head, gray hair pulled flat. She was not moving. She was not touching the glass. She was simply standing there, close enough that her breath had fogged a small circle on the window, and she was humming again, very softly, and I could feel it in the door panel beneath my left hand. I started the van. I did not care about the tapes, the cooler, the site deposit, any of it. I backed out of Site 14 in the dark with no headlights until I hit the main gravel road. Then I turned them on and drove straight to the check-in office, where Berta's light was on. I don't know what I expected. I knocked hard. Berta opened the door in a bathrobe, and I told her what I had seen. She looked at me for a long moment, and then she said, very quietly, that the documentary crew had been filming something about the park's history, that they'd found some interviews in the county archive that they hadn't been able to use, that there had been 3 missing persons reports from that park going back to 1979, all women traveling alone or with children, all from Site 14. She said the crew had packed up fast and hadn't left a forwarding address. I filed a report with the Newton County Sheriff's Office the next morning. They were polite. They wrote things down. Nothing ever came of it, as far as I know. I still have my inventory list from those tapes. 41 recordings. The documentary was never released. I never found a tape labeled with the interview I heard on that radio. Not in any of the 3 boxes,